We begin the 11th show today, and I would like to start by saying, when I first started doing the show, a lot of people would say to me, well, how many are you doing? And I'd say, well, I haven't really thought about it. And, they said, well, you're going to do 7 or 8. Or a very close friend of mine, when I did the ninth show, said, so you have one more show to do, huh? And I said, no, I wasn't planning on stopping at 10. He said, well, how many could you possibly do? And I said, well, I haven't thought about it again, but, we have thousands of pictures and we've been to many, many places, so I haven't really given it much thought. But lately I have. And, I've come to the conclusion that even when we take our next trip, which will be this May to Italy, and we'll be getting a lot more pictures of a lot more places, that eventually there's a finite number of shows that we could possibly do. So I began giving it some thought, and I've come up with a number of different ideas. And one of them is that I'm going to probably be focusing on some different topics, like more esoteric, like, for example, going into the small museums of Florence. Florence has the great museums, the Uffizi and the Bargello and the Accademia, but there are also about a dozen much smaller museums that don't have a lot of people going to them because they just don't know about it. And these museums, nonetheless, are actually fascinating. So that's going to be a future show. I'm also going to be doing a show on the churches of Florence, which are just magnificent. I thought I might do a show on the parks and the piazzas of Florence. I thought I might do some stuff on Rome, maybe the Roman Forum, things of that nature. So I have some things planned on that topic. I've also thought of getting into some more of the Hudson Valley artists, the local artists that we have up here. Woodstock has a lot of very, very talented people, and many of them do shows, do artwork on topics in Italy. For example, we had Rick Hurst a couple of weeks ago doing Michelangelo in Florence, and he's a sculptor. Next week, I'm going to have another well-known artist who does things related to Italy, a fellow by the name of Frank Palaia, and he has signed on to do a number of shows with me over the next few weeks. And I have a number of other artists that I'm in contact with for future shows. I also thought it might be a nice idea to do a series of shows on how to actually plan a trip in Italy. And this is, things, people always come up to me and say, Alan, I'm going to be taking a trip to Italy in the near future, and it'll be a 2-week trip or a 3-week trip, and we have some questions for you. And I always, I'm very happy to answer questions, and I've gone into, making plane reservations, making hotel reservations, planning the sightseeing, trying to determine the best places to go and the right time of the year and so on. But I realized that one of the main questions that people ask me on a regular basis is whether they should take an organized tour or whether they should actually plan the trip themselves. Now, they know that I've never taken a tour. Over the 19 times I've been to Italy, I've never gone on an organized tour. I've gone on a couple of tours here and there, but I haven't really taken an organized tour from beginning to end. And they say, well, do you know anything about tours? And I say, well, yes, I know quite a bit. I know people who've taken them, and of course I've done a little research myself, so I know quite a bit about tours. And of course I know about taking trips on my own. So I thought that this might be a first show. I'm going to try something a little different tonight. I'm going to actually talk about one of the most important things when you take a trip to Italy on your own, and that is being able to plan the trip on your own, but very importantly is being able to travel around. So that's the show that we're going to focus on. I've called it 22 Ways to Travel Around the Country. And we're going to cover, when I first started thinking about this, I said, well, let's see, you could take the car and a train and a bus and a tram, and in Venice you could take water taxis and vaporettos and so on. but I came up with a number of other possibilities, and I came up with a total of 22 ways to travel around the country. And that's what I'd like to focus on tonight. But the first thing I want to focus on is the concept of whether to take a tour, an organized tour, or whether to plan the trip yourself. What are the advantages and disadvantages? And I'm going to be fair. You know, I have a prejudice, and I'm not going to let it show too much because I want to really give you an idea as to what the relative merits of both are. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is an organized tour. And by that I'm talking about one of the famous tours. I don't want to mention particular names, but you know some of the famous tours that you could get where for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or longer, you could actually have everything planned for you. And why would somebody want to do this as opposed to a tour where they plan everything themselves? So I thought I'd go in a few of the reasons. And, obviously, a person who's never been to Italy and who doesn't know much about where to go would go to one of these organized tours, and they would completely plan it for them. So they wouldn't really have to think, well, should I go to Venice? Should I go to Florence? And so on. That, the tour company knows where to go and what to do once you're there. So that's a very big advantage, especially to someone who either doesn't know much about Italy or who doesn't have the time to do the research. They also plan, hotels. You don't have to research hotels because they do it for you. You don't have to plan restaurants because they do it for you. And you don't have to think too much about sightseeing because they will bring you to the best places. They do a very efficient job. If you want to get around to a lot of different places in one day, if you're on a tour bus, they will bring you to point A and you can get a chance to see that. And then rather than deal with, well, now what do I do? How do I use, the metro in Rome, or how do I use the bus system in Florence? You get back in the bus and they take you to the next location, and they're very efficient. So that's a very good way also. Of course, you don't have to think about how to travel around much because everything is done for you. And these are experts. You're on a bus or a van like you see here in the first picture, where there's an expert who's narrating the various places and answering questions on the spot. So tours are very, very good. And for some people, and I know some people who love tours and would not go on anything but, that is the best way to do it. I have never done that, and the reasons are the following. Sometimes they're too rigid. For example, I know somebody who recently took a tour of Italy, and they were in Florence for one day. They got there at 12 in the afternoon, and by the next morning at 10 o'clock, they were on the tour bus ready to go to the next location. And when I heard this, I said, one day in Florence? How is that possible? And they were, of course, not too happy about that because they would have wanted to spend more time. So that's a big drawback. Another big drawback is that, it's not adventurous. I like to, be a little more adventurous. So I plan a lot, and I'm a very plodding type of person where I have every hotel planned very rigidly and where I'm going and when I'm going to get there. And I've even researched restaurants and that type of thing. So I do that a lot. But within that context, there's still a lot of unknown factors, and I love those very much. Taking trains and buses and so on. You also may miss a lot. For example, one of the tours I actually did take was in 1995 when I was there with my first wife. We went on a tour, a bus tour, to Pisa. We were staying in Florence, and we took an organized tour to the wonderful city in western Tuscany known as Pisa. They're known for the Leaning Tower and some beautiful buildings. And we were there for 2 hours doing that. And we took some nice photos, and I think we may have even had lunch. But recently I was thinking about it, and I said, well, you know something? Well, I remember what happened. Somebody said to me, have you ever been in Pisa? And I said, well, yes, I have. And they said, how'd you like it? And I said, I don't know. Because even though I saw the Campo dei Miracoli, which is the Field of Miracles, which is the Leaning Tower and the cathedral and the baptistry, all of which incidentally are leaning to a certain degree, but it's the tower is upright like this. You could actually see it leaning. You can't see the cathedral that well in the baptistry. But I never walked down the side streets. I never saw the river. I never went to any of the restaurants, excuse me, in town. So I've never really been there. And this is a drawback of taking a tour. They gave us a 2-hour time limit, and we had to see what we had to see to get back on the bus. So this is a real problem. Also, traveling around. I'm the type of person who likes to travel around. I like to walk to places. I like to take buses and trains and as you know, vaporettos and water taxis and other means of transportation. I love doing this. And this is like, you miss this opportunity in a tour. When you're taking local trains and local buses, then you're kind of being close to the natives, the people who live there. This is, a very good thing. You're in a foreign country. On an organized tour, you're spending a lot of your time with, if it's from or originating in America, you're spending a lot of time with Americans. And, you're in Italy, you want to spend time with Italians. So I like to take public transportation because it gives me an opportunity to hobnob. And sometimes you have a conversation with somebody, and that's a very nice way to do it. So tonight's show is called 22 Ways to Travel Around the Country. And these are all the different things I do when I'm in Italy over the course of one of the sojourns that I have over there. So I'd like to start with the concept of walking. Now you may say, well, walking, everybody knows about walking, but first of all, number one, walking is a very important thing to do in Italy because you really get to see the city. And you get to cross the streets, which is fun, and you get to, kind of see into windows and shopping, and you get to scope out some restaurants that you might want to go to later, and you could ask people directions, so you get to speak to the natives. And what you're looking at now is a picture of a street in Florence, in the northern part of the Centro district, and you can see that there are quite a few people walking around. And the sidewalks are in pretty good, pretty wide. Sometimes the sidewalks are not so wide. Sometimes the sidewalks are non-existent. This is a piazza, the Piazza Santa Trinita, and it's hard to see this, and you have some better pictures, but the sidewalk on the right is a very wide sidewalk, but the sidewalk on the left is not. And you have this very wide piazza to walk through, so you really have to be very careful. This is a video of the street that I always stay on, Via della Scala, and I wanted to show you something about this. And Ellen, I'll ask you to hold the sound on this, and I'm going to narrate this myself. So this is the Via della Scala, which is where the hotel that I stay in. And this is a pretty good street, although you see there's construction there. And we're going to walk down the street now, and we're going to turn into Lydia's store. This is another advantage of walking around. You get to meet people. And one of the people I did get to meet in one of my walking arounds is Lydia, who's one of my closest friends in Florence. So this is as wide as a sidewalk will get in Florence. Otherwise, they're not going to be very wide at all, as you will see in just a moment. We're now going to take a brief right turn with the camera, at least, and I'm going to stop it when we get to that, and stop it right here. This is a street in Florence that terrifies me when I walk down it, and you can see why. There's only one sidewalk. The sidewalk on the right side, barely wide enough for one person, much less two. So whenever Laura and I walk down the street, we have to walk single file, and there is no sidewalk at all on the left side of the street. So this is an example of a street in Florence where you really have to be very, very careful. Here's another problem with walking around Florence, and that is that you have all of these Vespas, and first of all, they're parked practically on the sidewalk, but you could get hit by a Vespa, and I've heard of people who have. So this is Florence, and these are the Vespas lined up, waiting to plow people down, I suppose. This is a suburban street in one of the suburbs of Florence, and you could see that there's practically no sidewalk on the right, and a slightly wider sidewalk on the left. So this gets pretty difficult. This is a street in Bellagio, which I showed you earlier during one of the earlier shows, and there are absolutely no sidewalks at all. So you're actually walking in the road, competing with the cars. Nonetheless, it's nice to stroll around the streets, but you have to be aware that there are cars all over. Here's another street. This is a street in Montefiascone, and there are no sidewalks. These streets are ruled by the cars, and people have to share the street with the cars and be very careful. This is another suburban street, and you can see there's no sidewalk on the left, and there is a sidewalk on the right. And in Italy, of course, you get very interesting streets where you have to walk up perhaps a very steep street. This is a pretty steep street that would give you a lot of difficulty. And look at this street. This is actually a street where you get from one place to another. This is in the Umbrian hill town of Todi. And it's a beautiful picture of a medieval street that is really, and they kind of give you those ridges over there. This is their concept of steps, and it's really very, very difficult to walk up a street like that and even down it. And of course, there's this famous street that I showed you when we did Civita. This is extremely difficult pathway, but that's the only way of getting up into the town of Civita at all, so you really have no choice. This is my favorite kind of street. This is a pedestrian street. This is a, what's it called? Pedonale, pedonale means passenger, people, pedestrian. And I guess via pedonale means street for just pedestrians. And this is one in Milan. We haven't been to Milan yet, but this is a very, very beautiful street that it's called Via Dante, and it leads from the Duomo, where kind of in the foreground, to these Castello Sforzesco in the background. This is a pedestrian street. This is the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, which is another pedestrian street. And these streets, of course, are very nice to walk around because you don't have to worry about cars. Now, one of the things I like to do in Italy is to rent a car. And you could either rent a car by going to one of the biggest in Italy, which is Europcar. And there's another one. This is in a train station. This is a Hertz. So there are American companies also in the airports. There's Avis. This is outdoors. And I don't really use any of those. I use those, but I first go to an auto broker by the name of Auto Europe, which, I hate to publicize any particular auto broker, but that's a very good one. Auto Europe will arrange for you to rent a car. Now, they recommend that you get an international driver's license. Now, you don't really need it, they say, but then they say it's a good idea to get one. So I always get international driver's licenses, and this is what it looks like. This is an international driver's license from another country, an Asian country, and it's just basically what looks like our driver's license. This is what a driver's license looks like inside of the little booklet that they give you. And this is what an international driver's permit looks like when it's issued by the United States. And there are different places you could get these. I go to a place called IDL.com, internationaldriverslicense.com, and he's very nice and sends you the information very, very quickly. So this is what you need. This is very important because these are road signs in Italy. And you, of course, have to know what these things are. The most important, and again, let me use my pointer, this to me are the two most important. No entry. You can't go down a street that has these symbols, and if you do go down these streets, you're going to wind up going down a one-way street, and that could be very dangerous. This is also an important one. No stopping. Down here, you have no parking, and you have to kind of know all of these symbols, and there are about 25 of them that you really have to learn very, very well. Some of them are more important than others. This is a little close-up on that, and you can see that the one on the upper left, the stop sign, is one everybody should know, but there are other ones that you really should know as well. And those are some of them. This is a very important sign going into a town because they tell you where things are. If you're looking for a parking lot and you'd like to know where the parking lot is, they will send you to the Piazza Vittorio Veneto, and that's where the parking lot is. There will be hotels in that direction, and there are also hotels in other directions. So that's important. Then, of course, you come up to a sign like this. This is a very interesting sign. This is my worst nightmare. You come up to a sign which tells you, and you know, when you see two vertical lines up and down like that with a line across it, it means autostrada. So you're trying to find the autostrada to get to Napoli, let's say, which is to the south of Rome, and Salerno, which is also to the south. And you see that one sign is pointing you to the left, and then the exact same sign is pointing you to the right. This is my worst nightmare, because what do? You know, so you have to just pick a side, and probably you can get there both ways. But when you're riding in a strange place and you're trying to find your destination, this is very disconcerting. And you see the other two signs below, that Napoli is to the left, Salerno is to the right, and these are local roads. When it's written in blue, it means they're local roads. When they're written in green, that means it's an autostrada. This is another one of my nightmares. This is a sign that you come to where you see a variety of different things that are happening over the next several blocks. One, you're coming to a circle like, you know, you see in Kingston, the Kingston Circle at the end of Route 587, and this is similar to that, but they tell you what's coming up not only in the circle, but after the circle. So you're trying to figure out where your street is. At the same time, they're telling you some of the things you should be aware of, like, you know, no entry in one of those streets, and then a little further up is going to be another no entry, and you have streets going off to the left or right, and they'll tell you what those streets are. And they tell you another street as you look forward, and then as you look all the way to the top, there are two other streets, one of which is a street you can't go down. And you're trying to figure out where to go at the same time, drive the car, and all of this is happening within a few seconds of each other. So this is a nightmare for me. This is probably the worst of all for somebody like me. And what I'd like you to do when you're watching this right this minute is to take your eye off the screen for a moment and just let me tell you something. When you go back to the screen with your eye, I want you to find the sign. Now, you know, we're driving on a road and we're going to the destination of Pitigliano. So I want you, when you look back at the screen, to see how long it takes you to pick out the sign to Pitigliano. Okay, so now turn back and take a look. Well, you know, if it's taking you more than about 3 or 4 seconds, as it did me, and I have trouble seeing, you will see that the sign for Pitigliano, of those 10 signs that you see there all at once, you know, you're coming down a road at 50 kilometers per hour, you see this sign, I slow up. And there are actually even sometimes when my car goes right up to the actual sign and I stop, and Laura's going, oh my God, what are you doing? And I just say, let's pick out the sign we need and then we'll go in that direction. Or I say to Laura, you know, you take the signs on the right, I'll take the signs on the left, and as soon as we find out where to go, just say to me, you know, left or right. So as you can see, the sign to Pitigliano of the signs on the left is the 4th sign on the bottom, written in very small letters, you know, Laterra and Gradoli and San Lorenzo, and of course a very big city like Siena is written large, even Orvieto, but something which is much smaller like Pitigliano is written very small, and that is another nightmare. Nonetheless, I do like to drive occasionally. Now, you'd probably like to know what the roads look like, and I have 3 wonderful videos which flow right into each other. And again, Ellen, hold the sound on this. I'll narrate this. The first one you see will be an autostrada, which is the main 4-lane road that permits you to go the fastest. And in Italy, it's 130 kilometers per hour. And if you multiply that by 0.6, which is the conversion factor, you will come to the conclusion that the speed limit is 78 miles per hour. And a few people actually pay attention to that. Many people go even faster than that. I usually don't go higher than about 120 kilometers an hour, which is about 72 miles an hour. But this is an autostrada. It's going to have rest areas, beautiful rest areas, and it's going to take you through very beautiful scenes. And this first one is the autostrada that connects Austria and Italy in the very north through the Alps, through a pass known as the Brenner Pass. The next road you see will be a local road, and I'll talk about that when the time comes, but they're going to flow into each other. So here's the first one. This is the autostrada from Austria to Italy through the Brenner Pass, which is one of the passes that are carved into the mountains, and it's really very beautiful, as you could see. And there's a view of how it looks, along the sides. And the only problem I have on roads like this is I feel like looking at the scenery, and you see castles along the way and beautiful houses. And this is an autostrada, which is really very easy to drive on. Just, you go slow enough and you don't have to deal with, people going too fast. This is a country road that is going through the area known as the Creta Senese, which is the area south of Siena, through some very beautiful countryside of Tuscany. And it's a good road. It's only 2 lanes, one each way, and there are ways to pass, although you don't see any there. When you see the lines broken, that means that that's a passing situation, but this is not. But you see the beautiful scenery as we drive. And this is a local road, a 2-laner. And we're going to go into the next road soon, which is one of the scariest roads I've ever taken. That's coming up in a little while. See, I slow up. Here it is. This is a road that is going through an area of northern Tuscany known as the Alpi Appuane. And there we are coming up to a hairpin turn, known in Italy as a tornato. Tornante is a hairpin turn. And you can see that this is a very beautiful road, no line down the middle, a very, very low sidewall. And some of the roads don't even have sidewalls. And when you approach a car, you just basically have to slow up because there's no way of knowing, who's on one side, who's on the other. There's no line down the middle. So you're just riding down this road. It's very beautiful, but it can get a little treacherous, as every so often you're going to come to a hairpin turn. Here comes another one. And sometimes these roads have snow on them and ice on them, and that's a little challenging, and I'm not very happy about that. But I do take some of those roads sometimes, and this is what it looks like going down the road, and we're coming up against another Tornante soon. This is another hairpin turn that we're coming to in a very short time. And this is a beautiful road through the northern peaks of Tuscany. This gives you a really good idea of what's it like taking a hairpin turn. You can see that I've slowed down to a very, very low speed because I'm not taking that turn very fast at all. And you want to see that, look at that beautiful scenery. Okay, now we come to the next item, and I went a little too fast because it was in the slideshow mode, so let me go back to this. This is the best thing that ever happened to me when traveling in Italy. This is a GPS that I have now whenever I travel in Italy, and because of this, I've cut down on going to the wrong place and being very tentative and anxious by about 80%. This thing usually works, and it usually tells you all the information that a GPS will tell you in the United States, and it's wonderful. So I love that. And it's sometimes in the big cities, which I very rarely drive in. This is Milan, but you get some narrow streets, as you can see there. This is in Orvieto, which is even more narrow. Look, imagine driving down that thing. And sometimes you have to ride around a piazza like this, where the cars are whizzing around, going very, very fast. This is a very dangerous area called the Piazza Barberini in Rome, where the cars just whiz around. Everybody knows where they're going, except me. So I wind up, in one of those Chevy Chase situations. If you ever saw European Vacation, where he keeps going around that square in Paris, and you see he's doing it during the day, and then the next scene is, it's already nightfall, so he keeps going around and around. This is a good sign. This tells you that there's a parking lot nearby. You're allowed to park. This is a bad sign telling you that you can't park. This is the worst sign of all. The ZTL, a Zona Traffico Limitato. This means that if you cross the line where this sign is, you will get a ticket. And you're not allowed to drive. This is another example of a ZTL. And they have these in Florence mostly, where you cannot go into the main area. And if you do, you're going to get a ticket. And I did that once without knowing it in a town called Gallarate, which is near the Milan Malpensa airport. So this is a bad sign. And this is the gizmo that takes your picture when you cross it. And they will send this to you in the mail. Sometimes you're allowed to park by your hotel, and that's very good because you could park, let your luggage out, then you get back in the car and try to find parking on one of these streets. This is the street in Varenna that you may have seen earlier in one of my shows. This is a parking area, and you can only park in certain designated parking spaces. This is a parking lot, which is good because you can park anywhere in this lot, and sometimes you don't even have to pay. This is the parking lot, I believe, in Orvieto. And this is one of the two giant parking lots in Venice. There are two. This is called Tronchetto, which is a very big one, slightly further along outside of Venice than the other parking lot, which is Piazzale Roma, which is the parking lot where most people park. This is the drawback of parking in one of these big lots. You wind up paying very, very large rates. And keep in mind that these rates are, actually, this is New York City. I couldn't get one for Italy, so these are New York City numbers. But it's very similar in Italy. Okay. Then, of course, you have taxi riding. This is my favorite way of traveling. And, this looks like pretty innocent enough, but I'll tell you some of the pitfalls. So taxi, you can't hail a taxi. You can't go taxi like this, and a taxi will stop as in New York City. You have to go to a taxi stand, Fermata dei Tassi. And that's what the sign looks like, and this is what the stand looks like. This is the one outside the Rome train station, Termini. And you should walk right up to where all these cars, taxis are lined up, and go to a dispatcher who will not only get you a nice taxi of an honest, quote-unquote, taxi driver, but will tell you approximately how much it will cost. Unfortunately, sometimes taxis pull up right up to the curbside at the Rome train station, and these guys will rip you off for everything you have. I once just tried it as an example, and I said to a taxi driver, how far to Via Modena, which I happen to know is only a 4-block walk. He told me 50 lira. Not 50 lira, 50 euro. I said, 50 euro, that's $75. He said, well, Via Modena is very far. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's 4 blocks away. And we proceeded to wave to him goodbye and took off a few blocks away. We took one of these and we insisted that he put the meter on, which he did not do. And we got out of the taxi because he decided to pull over to the side and let us out because, he was ready to quote us a price and we were ready to use the meter. This is my friend Marco Barilli. And that's a bad picture of him because that's the best I could get off the internet. Here's a better picture of him, and here's his name. And I'll do a little publicity here, but if you happen to be on Lake Como in Varenna, this is the fellow you want to drive you around. I use this fellow to take me to the airport at Malpensa and back, and I've also called him in advance, and when I get off the train, this guy will pick me up at the train. He's completely honest. He's a wonderful man. He's got a great reputation. He has wonderful cars and vans that he drives people around in. He charges a lot of money, so it'll cost you about $200, which is an awful lot of money, to get from Varenna to Malpensa Airport, which is about an hour and a half But I like this sometimes when we have to catch a very early train or a very early plane where, the plane's going to leave at like 8 in the morning. You got to get up early and you got to, then the alternative is to take a train into Milan and then take a bus to the airport. So that's very, very difficult to do. So I signed this guy up. But for local routes, he doesn't charge that much, maybe €10. Marco Barilli. Always use him. Or you could take a water taxi in Venice. You know that I love this, and water taxis in Venice are absolutely delightful. And this is what it looks like. I look very relaxed in there because once I'm on a water taxi, there's not much you could do, and you get the greatest scenery in the world. There's David and Laura on the other side of that taxi. This picture taken by our good friend Randy. That's Laura and David actually getting on a motorboat. And that's Laura and I being very adventurous and riding on the back of a motorboat, which they let you do. And you could get some really nice views of Venice. A train. Okay, well, this is a little complicated. Taking a train is fun. I enjoy it. And that's a picture of me in the foreground with Laura leading the way with her blue suitcase, trying to get onto a Eurostar at, I believe, I'm not totally sure where this is, and I won't even say. I think it's Milan, but I'm not totally sure. I don't see a sign. But so this next segment is going to be taking a railroad train, and that's what it looks like sitting in a train. Very relaxing. And there are some railroad stations. Monterosso, and that's the train and the stop. This is, of course, in Cinque Terre, where we were last week. Manarola, another one. Rio Maggiore, those are the three stations in Cinque Terre. Orvieto, this is the Orvieto train station. And that's, I have a video here, which I can't show because I don't have time. But it's basically me complaining about the fact that the train is 2 hours late. At the last minute, they'll tell you the train has not arrived for a simple reason. Ladies and gentlemen, the train will be pulling in about 2 hours. So you have to stand there basically and wait, and that happens a lot. This is the Rome main train station, Roma Termini. Termini is the plural of bath, the baths, the Roman baths, referring to the baths of Diocletian, which are only about 2 or 3 blocks away from this. This is what it looks like on the outside. And again, don't take a taxi that pulls up right to the curbside. Take a taxi where they're all lined up, otherwise you'll be ripped off. This is the inside of a train station, the Rome train station. There's a lot of signs, so you really have to go through this slowly to figure out where to go. This is the Florence train station, Santa Maria Novella, and this is one of the great signs that I've ever seen. I've actually seen this sign on trips to Florence, and it's brought tears to my eyes because I just love being in Firenze. I don't mind saying that. This is Firenze Santa Maria Novella, SMN, which is the main train station. And this is what the train station looks like right by the tracks in Florence. And that's another view of it when there are fewer people around. You see that there are stores all along the side selling you newspapers, and there's a lounge there, and there's an all-night pharmacy. I like those very much. And here's what a train schedule looks like. So what you do is you go to the train station and you look at one of these, and they'll tell you first on the extreme left when the train leaves. The second column is the number of the train. The third column tells you what class it is. So if you insist on first class, you would not want the 917 train, which only has second class. The next column tells you where it goes to, and the last column tells you where the final destination is. So if the train is going to Venezia, let's say, along the way it's going to stop at those various places. I could read some of them, not all of them. There's Padova on there, there's Mestre, there's Brenta, and in the parentheses on the extreme right, you'll see when the train is supposed to arrive at the station. You pick the one you want, and then you get a train ticket. And this is what the ticket looks like. If it's just a regular train, not a Eurostar, this is the ticket you get. And, you can take any train you want. You just get on and try to find a seat. Good luck. Sometimes they're completely packed. So this is not my favorite train. I like getting trains where there are actually a chance to make reservations. This is another example of a train going from Lucca to Assisi. And this is a Eurostar. And the reason it's a Eurostar is that they're not only telling you all the information about where the train originates, which is Rome, to where it's going, which is Firenze, but it also tells you that, and I have to use the pointer again, which train it is. And right here, very important, car number 10, because you have a reservation, so you have to get to car number 10, and then it tells you which seat to go to. 52 Finestrina means seat number 52 by the window. Now, if it's Coriodo, it means Corridoio is the corridor seat, which is the seat in the aisle. But, posti means, the location, number 52. So when you get on the train, you have to really, move fast and try to find your seat. And this tells you how much it costs, which is 33 euro. This is the big board telling you when the trains pull into the station. And the extreme right-hand column is the one you want, because when a number lights up, that means the track that you have to go to. So you find your track, like the one on top, number 11. It's kind of hard to read that. It's easy to read this one. So you see at the very top, the train is taking you to Firenze, and it's leaving from track number 2, and you better get there no later than 8:48, because then it'll pull out of the station. So everybody kind of stands there staring at these boards, and when the number crops up on there, everybody runs in the direction of the track. So you don't even have to know where the track is, just follow the crowd. And there are all the different places. That's very exciting. Look at all those places. Venezia, Lecce, Fiumicino is taking you to the train station in Rome, Napoli, Brescia, Milano. You can go anywhere in Italy on one of these trains. And this is what the ticket window looks like in Florence. This is another ticket window, ticket station rather. That's a ticket window with no lines. That's good. You could buy your ticket in a machine, and this is difficult to use, but I usually go to one of these places, which is 90 times more relaxing. This is a travel agency. You could buy your train tickets in travel agencies, so that's where I go. And for a very small fee, there's no lines, there's no hassles. You're dealing with a person who speaks English, and you buy your tickets there. But before you get on the train, you must punch your ticket in one of these machines. So this is like urgent, and many people forget it, but you got to get to the yellow machine and punch your ticket. And this is a Eurostar, as I showed you earlier. This is one of the local trains, and the next one I'm going to show you, I have the name of it because I forgot yet, NTV, which is Nuovo Trasporto Viaggiatori. This is not yet in operation, but when it is in operation, it will go 350 miles an hour and will get you from Rome to Florence in less than an hour, which is really amazing. You could take a subway, the metro. It looks just like a subway in New York City. That's what the station looks like. They're immaculate. A train station. This is what the train looks like when it pulls into the station. Notice the doors open on the outside as opposed to a New York City train. This is the number 7, where the doors open within the actual walls. So it's a slight difference there. This is what it looks like sitting in a train, just like it looks sitting in a subway in New York. And this is the train line in Rome, the red line, the A, and the blue line, the B, which doesn't take you everywhere, but takes you to many locations throughout Rome. You could take a bus. This is what a bus looks like. Very nice. Beautiful new buses, a bus ticket. When you get your bus ticket in one of these stores, which is a tabacchi store, you ask for a bus ticket, and you then get on the bus at the back of the bus and punch your ticket. And if they catch you getting on the bus without punching your ticket, they do spot checks, you will get a ticket. And that's where you would get the bus. Another example, beautiful buses taking you to various places. In Italy, this is going to Brescia, which is between Milan and Venice. Another bus riding over there. This is my favorite bus to take. This is the bus that goes along the Amalfi Coast. I will not drive along the Amalfi Coast because it's too treacherous for me, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I take the bus, and look at that beautiful ride. And this is what happens. This is why I don't like to ride along the Amalfi Coast. Because you see here that one of those two vehicles is going to have to back up because there's no way to get past that. The truck will probably be the one to back up. And, it'll have to back up maybe 100 feet, and then the bus passes. And these roads are very, very narrow, and there's always backing up to be done. I'm a very bad backer-upper, so I would never do that. Of course, you could take a Vaporetto, which is a water bus in Venice. We've been down this road, so to speak, a few weeks ago when we did Venice. That's what a Vaporetto looks like inside. That's a traghetto, which is it's actually a gondola that takes you across the Grand Canal from one side to another. It takes about 2 minutes. Okay, this is a video that I, again, don't have time to show you, but I did show once before. You could take a gondola. These are very expensive, but, people usually take these because it's very romantic and kind of nice to do. A gondola stop where you pick up the gondola, a bunch of gondolas going down a canal. The Santa Claus is on a gondola. You could take a tram. That's what a tram looks like with the overhead electricity. Another example of a tram. This is Milan, which has a lot of trams. So does Rome. And again, you get in and punch your ticket. Another tram. I'm moving fast now because I'm running out of time. A ferry on Lake Como. A ferry station. We've been down this road, as you know, when we did ferries. That is what a ferry schedule looks like on Lake Como. A ferry boat. Another ferry boat. A hydrofoil, which is a high-speed ferry, goes faster than a ferry. A funicular, which takes you up a hill. Some towns are very high up, like Orvieto. You can't walk up these to the top. You could take a bus, but you could also take a funicular, and that's what it looks like. And this will just take you up. It's like a cable car that goes up the side of a mountain. Or you could take a cable car, like to get from Courmayeur in northern Italy to Chamonix in France. You could either take the Mont Blanc tunnel, or you could take a cable car. The disadvantage is, for me, I get height sick. The advantage is, look at the scenery. The most incredible scenery you will ever have. Look what that looks like. You're driving, from France to Italy or back in this beautiful, incredible scenery, which I could never do. You could take a ski lift. You could go skiing across the mountain. I've only known one person who went skiing from one place to another, somebody who escaped the Soviet Union. I should tell you about this sometime, into a free territory by skiing across the border. You could take a Vespa. A lot of these in Florence. That's what they look like. They're little motorcycles. You could take a bicycle. A lot of people do this. You can see the advantage is it's absolutely stunning. Scenery. Look at that scenery you drive through. I've never done this. You could take an airplane. Local airplanes take you from city to city in Italy. You could take a shuttle bus. Some of these shuttle buses take you from parking lots to the main part of town. That's what a schedule looks like. You could take a tour bus. And that's a sightseeing bus that many people like to take. Or you're back to the beginning, taking a van in an organized tour. And that's obviously, rather than learn all those other ways of traveling, this is a very good way to travel because you don't have to do too much thinking. Or if you want the easiest way of dealing with any of these situations, you could just lie down in your bed and take a nap and forget all about traveling altogether. So that is tonight's show. 22 ways to travel around in Italy. It's been a pleasure showing you this, and Send me an email. Tell me how you liked it, or call the station 679-7777. It's been a pleasure. Buonanotte e buona fortuna. I'll see you next week.